recording. So you'll just have to put up with the background noise today. If it gets too bad, just let me know, because then I'll have to go and change venues. But for me to get a good signal, it's kind of important that I'm close to the Wi-Fi. Also, I know this speaker, this microphone can be a bit finicky. Okay, so, right, Tahita, that question I'm not going to answer. But I'm going to give you some clues. All right. Okay. So let's get started at the beginning. The scenario is: you are fortunate to have a teaching post at a school that is renowned for their inclusive approach to education. The school caters for all groups of learners within the same classroom. As the school is within a popular suburb where most parents pay school fees, the school makes use of assistive devices where required. In other words, they're quite a well-off school, all right? And most of the parents are paying school fees, so it means that they will be able to financially assist as well as guide parents in terms of decisions to make. That said, please remember, this is a situation set in South Africa where not all parents are going to have that much money. And on top of all that, we've now got our present climate where everybody's a bit short on money. So you're going to have to make careful decisions in terms of assistive devices and recommendations that you make. And assistive devices, remember, includes both high-tech and low-tech devices, not only high-tech. All right. If the devices are only for one learner, the school then supports the family in finding the right device for their child's needs. Okay. On the other hand, if it's for multiple learners in the classroom, then the school would buy the device. Okay. So that's what you need to read into that statement. This also includes taking into account the child's context as well as considering which options are available. Okay, so you need to consider the child's context. Don't just go, oh, that would be fantastic. Oh, yes, some of those things would be fantastic. But to be absolutely honest, not everybody has 300,000 Rand in their back pocket. So you do need to look at the prices of the things that you consider. Okay, and if you have a look in the guide, there is a link to a couple of different sites that you can go and have a look at. I know I've given you the link to Edit Micro, who have fantastic devices. But they specifically for high-tech devices. I also gave you a link to Shonequip, who they do wheelchairs, especially for rural areas and for children who need rugged wheelchairs and that fit children. They are in the guide. You need to go and look at your reader, and you need to go and look at VC Learn. I put loads of extra things for you to go and have a look at. There are loads of links, and it's one of the reasons that we actually gave you the module reader as an ebook, so that you can click on those links. They're active links. Go and explore them. I tried to make this as interactive for you as possible. You don't just read the book and be finished with it. This is not just a textbook. It's a starting point to get you to explore the really interesting stuff that is out there and is usable. Okay. Then let's get on to the instructions. So choose one of the case studies to base your assignment on. Clearly state which case study you have selected by making that your heading. So if it's case study 1, I'm just going to flip to my next slide. It should say case study 1, Siyabonga. Correct. Be very specific, because if you mess up and you put case study 1 and you do Fazana, then I must be able to see that it's Fazana you're talking about. All right. Make sure you've got the right name with the case study, please. Otherwise, you're going to confuse me. Then, foundation phase, you are going to aim at a grade 2 child. Right. So because you guys are foundation phase students, you are focusing on a child in grade 2. Okay, and please remember what it says. I do not want anywhere for you to say, oh, the child should go to the special class, or the child should go out and see the remedial teacher, because this school caters to all groups of learners in the same classroom. And I'm looking for my little button to underline. Where is my underline button? Why do I not see my, they've changed the menu on this thing and I can't find what I'm looking for. Oh, there, underline. Caters for all groups of learners within the same classroom. All right. So you've got to write, it says an academic essay, all right? In other words, so we decided we wouldn't just let you make up the answers. So it's an academic essay, but it doesn't have to be a formal academic essay. It's more of a report, okay? You need to make use of the appropriate headings. So please, I know it says an academic essay, but please, if I see 10 pages that just don't stop and there's no breaks between them, I'm going to cry. Then I'm going to start taking off marks because at the end it does say you use X, Y, and Z, and you're going to lose marks if you don't use X, Y, and Z. So make use of appropriate headings, okay? And those appropriate headings are going to be under the rubric, right? And then you're looking at 2,000 to 2,500 words. If it's 100 marks, okay, in our assignment, it says the word count has been 1,500. Oh, okay, that's because we made it 1,500 and 2,000 words. I don't know why they did that. Okay, all right, we'll say 1,500 to 2,000 words. We're looking at approximately, try not to go over 10 pages. Okay, all right, so I'm going to put here limit at 10 pages, please. Right, and remember, it must be, and I'm going to put that in red. Right, limit at 10 pages, please. You have to 1.5 line spacing. I wonder if I can change it. Okay. I want 1.5 line spacing, please. Okay. And I need at least, must be size 12. I suggest Arial font because it's legible. Okay. So this makes it possible for me to read late at night when my eyes can't see straight because then the lines are not all squished together. Remember we were talking about this with visual impairments the other day. If the lines are too close together, it all mushes together. Okay, so please make sure you have size 12, Arial font, 1.5 line spacing. Okay, so start with which case study you've chosen. No, I don't need it justified. I'm happy with it left aligned. If you really want to justify it, you can, but I find it funny when you write if it's actually justified. So I'm happy with it left aligned, but please just the 1.5 line spacing, and please don't make it size 11, which is what it automatically sets to, or size 10, because you decided you needed to fit in an extra 600 words. All right. So then identify and discuss the two most prominent barriers. So it's already giving you a clue there. There have to be two prominent barriers. Okay. So what we did is we made the first one pretty easy to spot, and then the second one is a little bit more interesting, if you want to call it that. And it will benefit you to go and read further in your study guide, because that's going to help you work out what that second barrier is. So usually the first barrier is going to be a fairly obvious type of barrier. And then the second barrier is often something a little bit more subtle, so not as easily physically seen. Okay, right. Then you need to identify the child's weaknesses and strengths. Okay, you need to analyze the support needs. I'm going to talk about these all just now. You're going to create a support plan. You're going to make use of examples. Right, so when you do the support plan, I want you to make use of examples to explain the kind of support that you're going to do. So for example, if I had a child who has a visual impairment, I wouldn't just say I'm going to enlarge the paper, the work. I would say I'm going to enlarge it to A3 size. I will make sure that it's a minimum of size 36 font. I'll make sure that our 1.5 line the spacing or double line the spacing so that it's not going to all be on top of itself. Okay, practical examples. Okay, if I'm making a worksheet, I might cut the worksheet into sections and give the child a section of a worksheet at a time so that they don't feel too overwhelmed. All right. Then you're required to also include 1 to 2 assistive devices. Now remember, assistive devices are not necessarily high-tech devices. Okay, not everybody can afford a computer, but a computer is a nice one to look at if it's suitable. Not everybody can afford a 100,000 Rand wheelchair, right? If they can perhaps look at an adaptation for a manual wheelchair that simply puts something that helps the child to travel more quickly. So sometimes you get an add-on for a manual wheelchair with it, which actually effectively makes it into almost like a little scooter. Go and explore. You can find some interesting things out there. All right, and then make sure you put it an image of the device. By the way, 2 assistive devices doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be better than 1 device. And sometimes it becomes more expensive to have 2 devices than it does to have 1 device. And sometimes the cheaper devices don't upgrade or update, and then you have to buy another one in 2 years' time, rather than being able to have one that it might cost you a little bit more, and then you might be able to upgrade it. So when you have a look, when you're starting to consider assistive devices, take those things into account. Look at 2 or 3, and then motivate for why your choice was better than a different choice. And you can't say, I just decided I looked at these 2, okay? And because remember, when you're looking at those, you're going to be looking on the websites, add those websites in as references, okay? And so that I could go and have a good look as well. You never know, and I find something new and interesting. And then what you're going to do is you're going to say, well, I decided on this one for these reasons. Okay, so think about that. So you're going to motivate for why that is the better device for the child. Okay, more expensive doesn't always mean it's going to be the better device either, because many a parent has had to go and buy some fancy iPad, and then it's a child who's going to be very clumsy and is going to drop it. So then that's what, 10 grand down the drain. All right, so you think about that. Sometimes you get free apps that are just as good as bought apps. Okay, all right, and don't forget to include a picture. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to very quickly look at just the beginning of each of these stories. Okay, and you can see what I've done in the first one. This is just to give you an idea, and that's why I'm not giving you the whole thing. An idea of how you can go through and analyze the case study. Okay, so if I'm analyzing it, I started with Siyabonga as a cheerful child who has a passion for soccer. He lives with his mother, his grandmother, and his 2 older brothers. Siyabonga was born with a physical disability caused by a neurotube defect. It's a medical condition that has complications that affect his ability to walk. He has limited feeling in his lower legs and feet and fair upper body strength, although this is insufficient for his mobility needs. He needs to catheterize daily at lunch break, which he does independently, though he does need to be reminded as he tends to forget. Siyabonga uses a manual wheelchair to move around the school, though he is able to walk with a walking frame inside the classroom. So he can use a walking frame, but he can't walk very far with the walking frame. Siyabonga often needs other children to push him around, or he's late for classes when he pushes himself, because otherwise he goes very slowly, and it's exhausting. His older brother pushes him to and from school, but this means he's got to sit and wait for his brother to finish his extramurals. And his mother is a cleaner at a local business, and Siyabonga is sometimes seen sitting in his wheelchair on the pavement outside the business in the street until late in the evening. So what I've done is I've gone through and I've looked at things that are barriers. Now, if you look carefully, you'll see not all the barriers that I've chosen specifically relate to his disability. Okay, some of those barriers actually relate to contextual factors. Okay, So those are some of the sort of the negatives. The green ones that I've put in there are the things that I've started to identify. Not all of them, I might add. There are others that are there, but I've only identified a few for you that are positives. All right, so these are strengths. He's got a mother, grandmother, and 2 older brothers. So he has a good support system there. He has people to look after him. Yes, he has a physical disability, so that's a negative. And by now, I'm hoping that you read there, caused by a neural tube defect, and you went, oh, I know which that one is. Okay. All right. So I'm not going to show you the rest of this case study done like this. Does this give you some ideas? I usually, if I'm working with pen, I go through and decide on a variety of different things. Do you get some ideas there? In terms of the strengths and the weaknesses? Okay, great. So if I look at this, let's identify one support need that he has. So I've got given you the strengths and the weaknesses. What would one support need be, just from what we've got written here? What would one support need be? He needs other children to support him. So he has a mobility need. Okay, so he has a mobility need. So he needs additional assistance or support in terms of need. So there is an area that we can either look at supporting him in class with, if it's in class, or remember that the support needs that we provide don't only have to be for inside the classroom, they can also extend to within the school or within daily life, but they do need to have a school focus. So one of the problems that we've identified is he needs other children to push him around. So one of his difficulties there is going to be a mobility need. Off the cuff, can you think of any ideas that could support him in this need? Any ideas? I mean, he's already got a manual wheelchair. If it was Christmas and he could have anything, what would you give him? An automatic wheelchair, right. So there's a good start. Remembering that automatic wheelchairs start from about 70,000 Rand. The school might not have the money for that. Yeah. But they are expensive. So you can think about that a little bit and maybe you'll come up with some interesting ideas. Okay. And consider also what could you have in the school that would benefit not just him. Okay. What could you do in the school that could benefit not just him? All right. So there's some ideas that you can, just some ideas to get you going. Okay. Now, if we stay on him, I'm just going to quickly, I'm just swapping over to something so that I can look at the rest of it and you can't, but you can see it because you've got your own one. It says, at break time, he enthusiastically joins as the other children play soccer. He and a friend usually take the role of goalkeeper together. As Siyabonga is able to raise himself up on his knees with the walking frame, he sits in front of the goal and he catches the lower shots, while his friend stands behind him and catches the balls that go above his head or that he misses. Together, they make a formidable team. When the children were changing for PE one day, you notice Siyabonga has a lump on his spine that looks like it has scarring on it. When Dave, one of his classmates, asks him about it, Siyabonga replied that it was an operation that he had when he was a baby. He also shows Dave the scars on his feet from dragging his toes on the ground when he walks. In return, Dave shows Siyabonga his scar on his elbow from falling off his bike, and they laugh together about their battle scars. And I thought that was wonderful because you see a wonderful sense of camaraderie going on here, and the kids are accepting of each other. They don't even think anything of it. Siyabonga tries very hard in class. He always listens carefully to instructions and pays attention when you are teaching. However, he struggles to remember the instructions. During discussions, Siyabonga puts his hand up and enjoys engaging in the conversation. Even though he often only gets the easiest questions correct, he's always willing to try. And Siyabonga's answers tend to be short and simple, and he usually misses the deeper meanings or inferences. When reading, Siyabonga displays a good grasp of phonics, and he uses this to decode words that he doesn't know. His reading is slow and it lacks phrasing, and he disregards punctuation. But he practices it every day, and he is making progress. So what he does is something we refer to as barking at text. Literally, the children say the words, but they don't always understand what it is that they're meaning. Okay, when he does comprehensions, his answers are usually copied from the text, and usually only the straight recall questions are answered correctly. So this is now giving you clues about the second area that he's struggling with. Okay, does somebody have their hand up? No? Oh, I don't know what it just did. It's suddenly loading over and over again. Okay. Okay. Can you guys hear me? Just give me a sign. Okay, great. All right. So in terms of you're starting to see there's the second one coming up. Okay. So yes, the first one's obviously physical. All right. And you've got to be more specific. I want to know what kind of physical the clues are all there. All right. And then I want to know what the other one is. And you know what? You have to motivate for what it is. So if you happen to identify something that fits the bill and you motivate for it and you justify it, I have to accept it. All right. If, on the other hand, I read it and I go, no, disagree with your justification, we'll have to discuss that. But if you can justify your answer, if you can give me a good reason why his characteristics fit the bill for something, then I will accept it. Okay, so please don't feel, oh, what if I don't get it exactly right? Okay, there's a bit of leeway here. You guys are second-year students. I'm not expecting perfection, right? You've got to get out there and see if you can identify what that second one is. Okay, I'm just going to pop down quickly, and I'll come back to the others. So, identification of the barriers. This is worth 20 marks. Okay, and by now, what do you think? Let's get you guys thinking. What do you think the second barrier could be? From the clues that we've just looked at, what do you think the second barrier might be? Come on, he's using simplistic language. His reading level's fairly low. When he answers questions, he only gets the easy ones right. Things have to be very straightforward, which means he's not getting the abstract stuff, but he's very keen to try. So what do you think that second one could be? You don't have to be specific. You can just be general. It could be, think of it in terms of the units we've looked at. I can tell you it's not ADHD. Maybe a delay of some sort. Yep, you're on the right track. So we're looking at a delay of some sort. Is it a physical delay? Okay, so it's not physical. Okay, so more cognitive. Yeah, I wouldn't, guys, avoid the word mental. Okay, more an intellectual or cognitive delay. Yeah, I would say there's an intellectual or cognitive delay associated there. Okay, right. That may or may not be the only possible answer. Okay, so yes, you see, not that hard, guys. You can do it. All right. Then we look at the analysis of the strengths and the weaknesses. And I need to see at least three strengths and at least three weaknesses. All right. Providing an excellent analysis of the case study. So tell me why those things are weaknesses and those things are strengths. If I look at the fact that he lives with his mom, his grandmother, and two brothers, that in itself could be a weakness or it could be a strength. Why could it be a strength? Why could living with his mom, he's got a lot of support. Yeah, he's got two older brothers and his grandmother and his mom who are all there, right, to lend a hand because obviously he has physical needs as well. All right. How could that be a barrier? How could it be a weakness? So I'm looking at the same factor, but how could it be a weakness? I mean, obviously, it just depends on the child's actual family, but in some cases, that could be a weakness. Why? It's a small house. He could not have his own space to study and learn. Um, he may not learn to do things himself, or he could learn to do them wrong, quite. Could, absolutely, or could learn to do the wrong thing. He could be very spoiled. Mm-hmm. Consider the finances as well. His mom, grandma, and two older brothers. We didn't say what age they were, if they were working or if they're still in school. We know one older brother at least is still in school. So there's quite a few things there. It could be either, I mean, maybe grandma's really old. Maybe grandma needs to be looked after too. I don't know. Okay. So consider the fact that, okay, this is what often makes you guys feel a little bit nervous, is the fact that it's messy. All right. But remember, life is messy. Look at it the way you want to look at it. Okay. But I need to see at least three, and they must be related back. Just tell me why it's a positive or a negative. Okay. Then the next one, also for 15 marks, is the support needs analysis. All right. And we've already looked at, the physical support that he might need. So what would you guys mentioned that he may or may not have a, an intellectual impairment. What support might he need there? Okay. And you don't specifically have to say it's purely for intellectual impairment. You can look at something that he's struggling with specifically, and you can support that. So, for example, we were speaking about the fact that he reads very slowly, right? And that he, I told you the term is barking at print. So what's going to happen is he may not understand what he's reading. So you can look at a strategy to support that. He may not, in terms of the questions that he's going to answer, what need may he have there, and how can you support him in having difficulty with answering questions? So those are the needs. Okay. So you look at those. So, and it also says that your needs to identify needs to actually go past just those two barriers. So a nice example is the fact that he has difficulty with reading, and he's in grade 2, and he's going to have to go home, and he's going to have to read at home, because all kids have to go home and read at home. Consider the context that's happening. Does he go home straight after school? All right. Who's going to be supervising him? Who's going to be listening to his reading? Think about things like that. So think past just that. And then also consider the context. So what needs might he have, for example, in terms of his socioeconomic needs that he may have. All right, so things like that. So consider those needs as well. All right. Does that make sense to you? I'm literally just touching on things here and trying to give you a little bit of a starting point so that you don't feel too overwhelmed. Again, obviously, guys, these are the headings: identification of the barrier, analysis of the child's strengths and weaknesses, analysis of the support needs. Okay? All right, then you're going to do your support plans based on the strengths and the weaknesses and the needs that you have identified. You're now going to put together a beautiful support plan for me. All right, and it's going to address the learning needs. And remember, those needs, be quite specific. So look at the things that he specifically needs help with, or where he needs support with, and then bring in support for those areas. Okay. All right, so the big trick here is also consider, when you consider the support plan that you put in place, think about if any of those things that you're putting in place are going to help the rest of the class or other children that are in the class. Because I promise you, he's not the only one who has a reading difficulty. He's not the only one who may have difficulty answering questions. And some children may have difficulty answering questions perhaps because they're not English speaking. Right? So consider that. So that you can actually show how this would be something that could improve learning for all the rest of the class as well. It's not just to improve only his learning. That's the amazing thing. Once you start putting something for one child, you often find it works for other children too. Okay, and then and we're going to look at the assistive device or devices that you're going to chosen. 1 to 2. Don't go too overboard, please. Right, we'd love to be kitted out with everything possible, but 1 or 2, okay? And your choice needs to be something that's going to enhance the child's learning and functioning. Right. So if, for example, you make mobility easier, that can enhance the child's learning. How can improved mobility improve the child's learning? Think about that. Give me an answer quickly, off the top of your head. And may be able to engage in activities better. Yep. So improved mobility. Maybe it means they could move around in the classroom and get to the things that they want to get to. They may well not be tired from pushing their own wheelchair, right? Okay. There are some others that all tie in with the same kind of ideas, but you guys are onto it. All right. So the choice of device considers both the barrier experienced by the child as well as the child's context. So remember, you're not going to recommend something that's going to cost 300,000 Rand to a family who doesn't have 300,000 Rand to spend, unless you're perhaps going to suggest to them they tried crowdfunding, okay? Or approaching NPOs. Be specific. If you know of any good NPOs, let me know. Okay, right. The motivation is supported and well justified. So please justify your answer. You have to tell me why. Should you be using pronouns? Like as an I, me, we? I do accept I, me, and we. I believe this should be done X, Y, and Z. Yes, I would accept that. But don't go overboard on it. Okay. So don't go too overboard on the I, me, and we. We are asking you to give an opinion, but remember, we're asking you to back it up. So the moment you come up with a good reason that's justified, okay, a justification is going to be a reference. Why is that going to help this child? Okay, and if you've gone through the whole website and you found really great reasons, wonderful. Okay, because you're going to find most of this information on the internet. All right. And then make sure you use the suitable image and make sure you suitably reference your image. Okay, otherwise it's plagiarism. All right, any questions on that before I move on? Because I have a couple of tips at the end that I am also going to want to do with you. Okay, Jenna, you had a question earlier. It said, for the support plan, can we use any barriers that we feel are relevant to our case study, or do we need to use the barriers that are relevant, but also the additional reading? No, you can, if you can find a relevant barrier in your own research, I will be learning something new. Okay. All right. So no, if you find something that's not only in the guide or in the module reader, please go ahead and include it. So, but remember, the whole purpose of this is your motivation behind it. All right. So I would say it is possible that this child has X, Y, and Z. So try not to say, I think the child has X, Y, and Z. You can say, it's possible that the child has X, Y, and Z. And these are the reasons that we believe this. Okay. Okay, I'm going to get to this just now. But I want to do the do's and don'ts, and then I'm going to go back. We're going to have a quick look at the others. So my do's are, please use subheadings. Please use a table where appropriate, but make sure that you reference and you include sentences or phrases that make sense. Think CS, but please don't put the whole CS document in. I don't want the whole CS document in. Okay. Yes, you can suggest that a child could have ADHD, but you wouldn't say this child has ADHD. You could say it is possible that this child may have ADHD. So I'm going to type it here so that you guys have it in. So it is possible, and the word may is your friend. It is possible that the child, we use his name or her name, may have ADHD, right? But in order to confirm this, the child would need yeah, let's do this one. Child would need to be seen by pediatrician can you see the language I'm using there? I'm not saying this child definitely has X, Y, and Z, all right? But if, or I could say, you know, according to ADHD.com, this child may have ADHD because the child has the following characteristics. And then at the end of it say, but this would need to be confirmed by. All right. And in doing so, we would refer the child to see somebody and put the somebody you'd refer. So you can use tables. I don't want lots and lots of tables, but when you do that, that analysis, those analyses, it might be easier for you to do it in a table. But remember, I want sentences, please, and references. Just because you're writing in a table does not mean I want little points that aren't contextually based and I have no idea what you're talking about. Okay. Please, if you are using a table, put an introductory sentence before providing the facts of the table. So I would say, yes, you could. Definitely. Yes, Jenna, that's right. You could refer them to have a psychological assessment. Okay, if I'm going to put things, okay, guys, avoid putting bullet points if you can. You can, but it has to have an introductory sentence. So it can't just have bullet points, and it has to make sense. All right, so you can use those, but please make sure you have an introductory sentence. Reference. No, try not to number your points. Rather, if you're going to bullet them, bullet them. I don't mind a dot. That's fine. Don't go wild on weird and funky pictures. But yeah, try and, you know, generally we're not going to number them. Okay, no, not everything can be referenced. Okay. Not everything's good. So if, for example, it's something from the case study, and you're going to say, so he lives with his mother, his grandmother, and his two brothers, it still needs a motivation. So why is that your strength, or why is that a weakness? Okay. All right. And you can refer back to some of your textbooks that have looked at children's contextual information. All right. You can also look at, do you remember UNESCO document that you've got? It also talks about some of the contextual factors as well, I think. All right. That those internal and those external, the intrinsic and the extrinsic and the individual barriers. So you can have a look at those. That's where you would motivate for that. Okay, Jenna. Okay. Yeah, so what happens is you're backing it up by using a document that says this is a contextual barrier. Okay. Then use other sources rather than just the reader. Use the reader as a starting point and then go exploring. All right. Check your grammar. Get your mom, your dad, your auntie, your friends, brothers-in-laws to check your spelling and grammar. Please. Okay. Because the easier it is to read, the easier it is for me to look for the information that you're providing. And then do your research. Okay. Big don'ts. Don't put in a table of contents or a cover page. There is going to be a high case of, problem is, there's going to be a high level of plagiarism. So let's avoid putting in things that are actually just going to give us extra copies of the same things in everybody's assignment. Please don't give me a table of contents. Please don't put on a cover page. Yes, put your name there, but and that it's an assignment, but please don't make me a fancy something. And please do not copy and paste the entire story and stick it in there. I know some people like to do that. Please don't, because it's literally going to push your plagiarism right up. Okay. Please don't use phrases that have no context. So, for example, if I'm going to say that A negative may be the fact that he lives with his mother, his father, his mother, his grandmother, and his two brothers. I'm not just going to say mother, grandmother, and two brothers. That means nothing if I just have that. I mean, yes, it comes out of the scenario, but it doesn't explain anything to me. Okay. Please don't forget to reference. Please don't write long and unending paragraphs. Short paragraphs. Talk about one thing in one paragraph. Generally, I wouldn't go more than 5 sentences in a paragraph, and please, it must be 5 shortish sentences. Please don't make a paragraph of one long sentence that never stops and never takes a breath. Okay. And then please don't use the same source over and over again. Once you use the source, it's counted as that first source. If I say according to Brown, blah, 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 and then Brown still says blah, 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 and Brown says that again, and then at the end of it, I have another sentence, and in brackets, I've got Brown. That's only one source, guys. Right? And then try not to use me as your source, please. This is one I see often. Okay. Now let's go back and look at the other case studies. Any questions before I do that? Okay, let's look at Fazana. Okay. What is the format for a report? It's like the format for an essay, except it's got headings and subheadings. Okay, and it doesn't have to be quite as formal as a standard essay. Okay, but still no words like kids, still no words like no ums and ahs, no can't, so cannot, could not, may not, may. So you want those words to come in. It's formal language, but at the same time, it's putting together a report that could go towards, for example, if we had to have what's it they called? A SBSC meeting, when you're going to have a case conference and you're going to put your suggestions towards, supporting this child. All right, so let's have a look at Fazana. Fazana was born at full term after a difficult birth. Her mother had been expecting to have a natural delivery free from problems as he had done with her first 4 children. However, the umbilical cord had been wrapped around Fazana's neck and she was eventually delivered by emergency C-section. Fazana was quite blue by the time she was born as her brain had been starved of oxygen, which resulted in her having a physical disability. Okay. So now you need to think of a physical disability that is caused by not enough oxygen to the brain. Fazana comes from an intact family who dote upon her. Her father was an actuary who lectures at the local university. An actuary is like, basically, let's go maths genius. Okay. And her mother stays at home to look after her, but is a qualified engineer. She has 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters, all of whom are straight A students. Fazana has the classification of quadriplegia and uses a wheelchair for mobility purposes. Her mother pushes her to the classroom each morning and collects her from the classroom each afternoon. But Fazana pushes herself around inside the classroom. So by the way, just because you have quadriplegia doesn't mean you can't move your limbs at all. It means that there is impairment or weakness in those limbs. All right. And then Fazana's mother volunteers at the school library so that she can be available if needed to assist with toileting and feeding during breaks. So you can think about the positives that she has and the negatives. All right. Let's hear very, very quickly from you. Can you quickly give me a positive that you see there? What are some of the strengths that you see? Just 1 or 2. Right, she's got a helpful mother. She's well supported by her mother. Okay, lovely. All right. What about she has an intact family? Absolutely. She's able to push herself around in the classroom. Wonderful. What about some of the weaknesses? What are some of the weaknesses that she's got there? So what are some of the barriers? Okay, so she needs assistance with feeding and toileting. She uses a wheelchair. Only her father works. Okay. What support, what need can you identify there? What kind of a need has she got there? Let's see if you can find one need that she has. So Shad, if you think that only her father working is a negative there, consider the fact that if he's an actuary, he's highly qualified, probably earns a very good salary. Okay, so she's relying on her mom to get her to and from class. So what need does that come up with? What could we call that need? She has mobility needs, absolutely. So she has mobility needs. I think perhaps she possibly has some independence needs there as well. Absolutely, well done. Denise, spot on. You got me there too. Okay, so definitely, if she's capable of pushing herself around in the classroom, she's probably capable of doing some other things too. Hmm? But from the sound of things, if she can push herself around the classroom, she's probably going to find she's going to have slightly more difficulty with in terms of fine motor. So maybe she's got better gross motor control. I don't know. You'd have to read more to find out. Okay, and I'm going to leave you to see if you can work out what the next one is going to be. All right, let's look at the third case study. So Dylan was born prematurely with a very low birth weight. Unfortunately, Dylan was born with a condition that could have been avoided if his mother had controlled her habits during pregnancy. However, she was still in her late teens and was more interested in having a party life than becoming a mother. Shortly after his birth, his mother abandoned him in the hospital, and Dylan was later adopted by an old couple whose children had already left home. Dylan knows that he is adopted and calls his adopted mother Mom. Dylan has unusual facial features. He has small eyes with epicanthic folds and a flattish face, a thin upper lip, and an indistinct philtrum, which gives him a rather elfin look. He also has heart and kidney problems. Dylan's milestones were delayed. He sat at 10 months, walked at 20 months, and only started to speak when he was 2 years old. Come on, guys, identify a barrier here, please. While I'm reading, you identify. Dylan's language is still approximately 3 years below the level that it should be. Delayed milestones. Can we get more specific? Mom says that once he started walking, he ran and he never sits down if he can avoid it. Often Dylan does not seem to hear when you're calling for the children's attention and will seem to ignore frustrations. Right, Jody, I think you spotted that one. FAS. Okay, and then additionally, we're looking at language and reading. Okay, a few times you've walked up behind him when he was busy and he's gotten a huge fright when you've touched his shoulder, even though you were not being quiet on your approach. Yeah, Tahida falling under cognitive delay. We're looking at our FAS there. And there's another thing here that we actually haven't yet looked at in class. I will only be looking at it with you next time, which is why I said you guys have to keep reading the manual. Keep having a look through, because there are additional things that we have included. And there's a nice clue in here for you that we've just looked at. So if you think, Sandra, good. So often Dylan does not seem to hear if you're calling for the children's attention, and he'll seem to ignore those instructions. And if you walked up behind him, but you haven't been quiet, you touch his shoulder, he gets a big fright. He hasn't heard you coming. Okay, so that hopefully gives you guys some clues to go and work with. What is a positive? I want to know a positive. There's some definite positives here. He has a family. Absolutely. He's got a loving adopted family. He's got a good relationship with his mom. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Also, even though he's got delays, they're not that far behind. They're a little bit further behind, but it's not that far. Okay. Consider now, what needs does he have? What support needs does he have? Right, language needs, hearing needs, okay, help with reading. And Jenna, think about it, if he needs help with reading and he's had a bit of a language delay, if that's related to the hearing, it could all be connected. So what are some of the things we might suggest for a child like this? What some of possibly a hearing aid. But I know as a teacher, I wouldn't be able to say this child has to have a hearing aid. I'd have to, consider a hearing aid, suggest, something like going for a hearing test, and then the possibility of a hearing aid. Okay, right, you're getting ideas, guys? Giving you a little bit of kind of direction. I know we didn't really look with case study 2. Do you want to look at case study 2 quickly at see if you can identify possible second ones? So then his educational needs, what can he, what needs has he got in the classroom? Absolutely. Right. I know, Tahida, you were asking about case study 2. Want us to have a very quick look at a little bit further into case study 2, because I know we only did the first one in case study 2. We didn't look at the second barrier. And this is a little bit of a twist. It's actually quite a funky one, I think. All right, so Fazana speaks slowly with a slur, and it's often necessary to ask her to repeat herself several times in order to be understood. She is keen to engage in discussions, and she's often got excellent understanding of content that is discussed, drawing from her extensive general knowledge. Fazana often finds it frustrating when her peers do not catch on as quickly as she does, and you sometimes feel that she knows more than you do. Right? You notice that she has an incredible memory and only needs to read or hear something once in order to understand or recall it. Fazana learned to read at the age of 3 by listening to her older siblings practice reading as part of their homework. She reads at a level 4 years above her chronological age. So can anybody tell me what they think is quite interesting? Denise, on the ball. Okay, so that's something to look at. So please go and have a look and look further and see how that could be a barrier and how you could support her. Did you think of that, Tahita? Because you asked about it earlier. Is Tahita still here? No, she's not. I'm asking questions to her. She's not even in the room. She's got no connection. She's disappeared. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to leave you guys there. All right. And you can use the rest of your LAC sessions to work on that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what I see on Monday when you guys submit. And you know where to find me if you've got any other questions. Okay, I'm glad. Now, I've been trying to find a chance to do this with you. It's been so complicated trying to find the time at the moment.